It's good to be here at Westside. I need to thank Reverend Woodbury for allowing me to guest in her pulpit, the people that invited me. I need to thank Jean, who got me here because my GPS didn't. I'd like to thank everyone who participates in this worship, Yuki and Stan and Gail and everyone. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. Since I was here in 2015, lots of stuff has happened. 3 things in particular that I would like to talk about because they have turned my world upside down. First of all, there was an election in November. I voted. It's interesting to me that we have 50 choices for Miss America, but for president, only 2 or 3. I don't know why that is. It seems to me we should have better choices. But I voted. We'll talk more about that later. Second thing that happened to really upend me was that in January I retired from my full-time job. So now I have time to get in all kinds of other trouble. It's been really strange. I think I'm flunking retirement because I already have another job. In fact, I start tomorrow. But that's okay. It's been an interesting thing. The third thing that happened to change my entire life and point of view was that in January, I marched in the Women's March. It was a surprise to me because I hadn't been out in the streets in a long time. Now, I didn't go to Washington. I couldn't do that because I was still working. But one night last winter, a friend of mine and I were talking about the march, and we said, what can we do? We want to make a statement. What can we do? And she went online and found that a women's group in Dallas actually had a chartered bus that was going to Austin to march on the Capitol there. So I said, well, what do you want to do? She said, let's do it. Let's go on that bus for the Sister March. And so we got tickets, and just like that, we were on the bus to go to Austin. And we went and we marched. And we made statements about what we thought the country was doing right now. But I didn't come here to talk about politics, so don't worry. I came here to talk, among other things, about what it felt like to be on that bus. So I'll get to that in a minute. But I have to tell you that the minute we got the tickets, the phrase being on the bus started haunting me, and I thought, where is that from? What does that mean? And as you may know, when you advance in life a little, the recall gets a little longer. Your memory is all there. It just takes a little longer to go in the back room and access it. So it took me a while, but I did track down where I got that on the bus reference. And it was from a book by Tom Wolfe called The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which he wrote about Ken Kesey and his merry pranksters in the early 1960s. Ken Kesey, as you know, wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and that came out in 1962. It was a big hit. In 1963, the play came out. Ken Kesey was now golden. Everybody knew who he was. And he was in California gathering followers because he was very charismatic. And he was making the scene with the poets and intellectuals and the beats. Allen Ginsberg showed up. Everybody was there. It was part of the growing psychedelic movement because LSD was not yet illegal. And it was sweeping the West Coast. So Ken Kesey was expanding his consciousness along with his other followers, and they all decided, let's expand our consciousness, let's get a bus, paint it Dago colors, and drive it across country to the New York World's Fair. So they did that in 1964, and Tom Wolfe recorded the whole trip in his book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. Well, while they were going on this mad adventure with drugs in the lemonade and sex in the upper bunk and rock and roll blaring and people acting like fools, really, to scare the establishment and usher in the new psychedelic movement, while they were doing all this, one of the people actually got off the bus and got left behind. And he had to hitchhike for 4 days before he caught up with the bus. But Kesey said, well, you're either on the bus or you're off the bus. And if you're off the bus and you get left behind, it's all right. You'll find it again. And Tom Wolfe recorded this in his book. And he also talked in the book about how Kesey and his followers, with their raised consciousness and their shared experience and their sense of being elevated above the straits in the world, they were like a budding religious cult. And in their eyes, they were the aware or the attuned, and everybody else was not. They were on the bus, and everyone else was off the bus. Now, I have had my own share of mystical or transcendent experiences, but frankly, I have never felt myself to be part of a knit-together community like that. I was never that cool. I never felt that I was on the bus until January. When I was on that bus going to Austin, I did feel that I was part of a community of people who had awakened and were aware of a common cause and an urgent crisis to which they needed to respond. People who felt themselves somehow to be vessels of a higher calling. Tom Wolfe would have said, to be vessels of the divine. So we answered that call, and we felt that there was a current crisis in the United States. But don't worry, I didn't come here to talk about politics. I came here to talk in part about what it felt like to be on that bus. But to do that, I really do need to talk about the crisis that I see in our country right now. So let's talk about that just a little. It's simple. It's not a political crisis, in my opinion. It's, I would say, an identity crisis. I believe at this point in our history, in looking ahead in our future, that we have simple questions to answer that are nevertheless very knotty for us and constitute the divide that people always talk about. Very simple questions. Are we going to be a nation that stands for peace or that profits from war? That's the first question. Second question is, are we going to be a nation that maintains a democratic republic or that becomes an oligarchy or a plutocracy, whatever you want to call it, gives its power to the wealthy few? And the third question is, are we going to be a nation that conserves its resources and hands them on to our children, or are we going to be a nation that just wastes them all and doesn't care about the future? Those are three very simple questions, but they do constitute an identity crisis that I believe we are in the middle of. But I didn't come here to talk about politics. And the reason for that is that I don't believe these are right and left questions. I believe these are life and death questions. So if you look at this as an identity crisis, an existential crisis, then we have to look at our current system. Let's unpack it a little bit. Let's go in reverse order. First of all, I do think the rich are pretty much in charge. Do you think? We have let that happen through our courts and through our laws. The inequality between rich and poor is growing, you know that. We have 8 people who own as much as the half of the people on the planet. We used to say, if Bill Gates had a nickel for every time I had to reboot my computer, oh wait, he does. There is money in politics now to a degree that is startling, I think. Corporations are persons. Money is speech. And therefore, corporations are allowed free speech, and they don't even have to show their faces. Right? So now, if a space alien comes to the planet and says, take me to your leader, we don't know who to take them to, because we don't really know who's in charge. But I don't think it's us. The current system is 3 wolves and 1 sheep arguing over what to have for dinner. The second thing is, we say we love peace, and in our hearts as Americans, we stand for that. Our greatest generation stood for that. Our whole country stood for that. And yet, over the years, over the decades, we've created an industry in this country that doesn't look like that. We are the arms dealer for the world. You know that. We have boots on the ground in over 100 countries. We spend more than the next 10 countries combined on our military. And because we've named it the War on Terror, we have guaranteed that we don't ever have to end it. So that is our situation now. I am not smart enough to tell you how we got there or how to unwind it. That is way above my pay grade, and I suspect it's above yours too, if we're honest. I will say this. When I look at our doctrines, since the Bush era, it's been the doctrine of preemptive self-defense. That is, simply stated, that it is okay for us to attack another country if we think they're going to attack us. That's just what it says. And we've lived by that, and that is been our stated doctrine. So I apply, being simple-minded, I apply the elementary moral principle to that, which is that if it's okay for us to do, it would be okay for them to do, right? There's a cognitive dissonance there. Doesn't match. Because we don't think that. We don't think it's okay for them to attack us if they just think we're going to attack them. So our own actual doctrine does not align with the elementary moral principle that we are all taught as children. It's a fissure in our own hearts. It's not a divide between me and somebody else in the country. We all share this dissonance, and we all have to resolve it some kind of way. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. But that's the second thing. The third thing is that last September, scientists told us we passed the point of no return on carbon emissions. Who knew? Well, actually, everybody knew. In September, they measured the carbon in the air at 400 parts per million, and they told us it probably would never get below that in our lifetime again. But we still want to draw more fossil fuels out of the ground, even the hard-to-get ones, the ones that are hardly worth getting, in the sands and stuff. And we still want to subsidize our unsustainable food systems, the ones that produce those other greenhouse gases that nobody wants to talk about because they're rude. We still are doing all of that. But I still say, I didn't come here to talk about politics. In the 1960s, there were a lot of people in the streets protesting all these same issues. These crises are not new. And I want to know, where did all those people go? Where did all those beautiful people, where did that action that committed action of bodies, minds, and spirits, where did it go? That's what I came here to talk about. Those years of protests went on and on. It wasn't one and done. It was a collective action of a powerful community of human bodies, minds, and hearts. There were results. We had the Civil Rights Act in 1964. In 1970, the Environmental Protection Agency was formed, signed into law by who? Yes. In 1973, the Vietnam War ended with the Paris Peace Accords. Then what happened? The beautiful people were absorbed into the baby boom, and according to Bruce Gibney, who is a historian I'd never heard of, but just wrote a book this spring, a generation of sociopaths was born. That's what he called it, and the subtitle of his book is How the Baby Boomers Betrayed America. It's on my reading list. I'm a little scared, but I'm going to get it. According to the reviews, Gibney's argument is this: the baby boomers ran everything for the next 30 or 40 years, and you can see the evidence in things like, well, tuition hikes at public universities. They didn't happen until after the baby boomers had graduated. Welfare got harder to get only after the baby boomers were kind of established and didn't need it anymore. The estate tax ended once the baby boomers' parents were conveniently expiring. And environmental reforms, well, we did a few things through the EPA, but not nearly enough. We had 30 years to do it. And the baby boomer culture became one of isolation and loneliness. We had to consume more to just keep going. We built houses in the suburbs with big privacy fences. We have online identities, but we find ourselves more alone than ever. Oh, but I'm a loner by choice, you're going to say. I know, I get it. I get it. You're not a joiner. Well, you got a Costco card, but you're not stupid. You want to be invited. You just don't want to go. I'm the same. I'm an introvert. I speak in public, but I have social anxiety. But now I think it's time to get over ourselves and not be a loner anymore. I think it is time that we rise up and join up. We need now a collective action of a powerful community of human bodies, hearts, and minds. And it would be nice if that community had experienced being vessels of the divine, the way Tom Wolfe talked about religious communities forming. So I think it's time that we get on the bus, that we go to real places with real people in them. You know how the media like to manipulate the size of the crowds when there's protests? You know, you see a picture, a long shot with thousands of people there, and the media will say, oh, hundreds of people showed up. I know how many people were at the march in Austin because I was physically there. You can't fool me about that. I can know a certain bit of reality because my physical presence makes me able to know that. I know that because I was there, I got off the bus, I met my daughter there, I hugged her skin to skin. We marched together. There were other people that I could feel and see and touch and smell and march with. It was warm. The sun was out that day. I had a real experience. You don't need a velveteen rabbit to know that you're real when you are doing something that is real. And that kind of experience is what has been missing for so many people. I met some beautiful people there, and I'm not going back. Corporations can't apply the elementary moral principle. Because to do that, you have to know the other as a human being. Therefore, a country that is led by corporations cannot be morally led. What I'm saying is that I believe we need to restore our whole country's identity as a country of human beings, not corporations. I don't know how we're going to do that, but I think you do. The reason I think that is because you're here. You're here in this place right now, on this carpet, under this ceiling, in these lights, with these people. And you're here in community most Sundays. You're not isolating. You're not at home trolling people on the internet. You're not shopping or watching other people have lives instead of you having a life. Do you have flower communion here? Then you're flower children. You are on the bus. And oh, the places you'll go, the things you'll do. First of all, on the bus, we'll be conserving fuel, won't we? On the bus, we will be able to share truth as individual human beings. Fake news becomes much easier to spot when you can bounce it off a real person. You can know the truth better in authentic relationships. You can't Photoshop that. That's something you can experience amongst human beings. On the bus, we will reclaim the republic. On the bus, we will wage peace. We will love relentlessly. On the bus is where the wars end. On the bus, we will talk about how to change what we must change to keep the planet alive. That's what we'll do. And it's a huge transformation. It must start now. It must start with us. We'll be riding with the next generations, I hope. I hope the baby boomers aren't the last chance, because I've met some of those millennials and some of those Generation X's and Y's, and they are pretty cool. So I say, let's go with them. Let's go with them further on the bus. I used to think the brain was the most important organ, but then I thought, look what's telling me that. Now I think it's the skin. Your skin is your largest organ. It is literally what holds you together. It is literally the organ that delineates your personhood and makes you an individual. But at the same time, it is the organ with which you touch others, to know that you're not alone. And we're not alone. We are together. And we are going further because we are all on this bus. And let the people say, Amen. Amen. Please rise as you're willing and able for the closing hymn, which is the Blue Boat Home in your blue hymnal, number